Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to the Primary Industry Training Organisation's Biosecurity videos that show you how you can check and apply sound biosecurity practices in your workplace. Biosecurity New Zealand has a significant task of developing a system to protect and respond to biosecurity risks, threats and breaches. They want all New Zealanders to play their part so that our biosecurity system will be resilient. Our lifestyles, our livelihoods, our economy and our unique biodiverse environment depend on it. Primary ITO has partnered with many of our sectors in this project and I thank them all for their input. The videos will provide you with helpful information. By taking these ideas on board, we can strengthen our ability to protect our industry now and in the future. Ko tātou, this is us.
New Zealand's primary industries produce the livestock, meat, milk, crops and nursery plants that we use and sell every day. However, these products are all vulnerable to attack from harmful pests and diseases. In your workplace, you will already be taking action to protect your crops and livestock. Many of these actions will be part of health and safety, food safety, good agricultural practice, or to meet export requirements. Use this video along with information from your industry to be more aware of how you already implement biosecurity and what else you could do to strengthen your current practice. Start by managing how vehicles enter your property. Limit the number of entry points to as few as practically possible. Have clear signage and your contact details at all entrances. Make sure anyone coming onto your property knows what to do on arrival. This can include using the correct entrance, contacting you for permission to enter, and ensuring their vehicle is clean. Provide designated parking areas away from livestock or crops. It is good practice to give drivers a short briefing on your biosecurity requirements, particularly if anything has changed since you saw them last. Make sure they know the standards expected of their vehicle, what areas of your property they can visit, and the hygiene practices they need to follow. Vehicles and equipment that are clean present a reduced biosecurity risk. Undercarriages, grills, floors and trays can all carry weed seeds, soil, plant material or manure that may be harbouring pests or diseases. Depending on the livestock or crops you are working with, consider providing a dedicated washdown area for vehicles. Locate it well away from animals or production areas. Have a sump to collect wastewater and solids, or make sure the runoff is contained. For maximum protection, follow the washdown with a disinfectant solution.
Vehicle cleanliness is really important to us on a sheep and beef farm because of biosecurity risks of foreign matter, diseases, seeds, anything like that that could potentially cause disruption or risk to our, to the farming operation. Any vehicle coming onto the property arrives and goes to a set aside washdown bay, is cleaned and then is disinfected so that we ensure that it's entering the property in a clean state.
Where possible, minimise vehicle movements on your property. Ask contractors to stay on formed roads and tracks whenever possible. If you need to transport visitors around your site, use your own vehicles. Before working with plants, crops or livestock, make sure your tools and equipment are clean and, if necessary, disinfected. Cleaning removes any sap, mud or other material where disease-causing bacteria, viruses or spores can live. Give regular reminders about equipment hygiene, for example, in toolbox meetings or at the start of activities such as harvesting or pruning. This is so everyone is confident in what they need to do. Consider cleaning equipment before starting a new task or working in a different block, paddock or growing area. If you have identified pests or diseases, always clean and disinfect equipment between plants or areas to prevent their spread or to contain an isolated outbreak. If you have diseased plants or infected livestock, work with these last in the day, as this reduces the risk of infecting healthy plants or animals. Thoroughly clean and disinfect equipment after use and before using it again. You may even want to have dedicated tools, equipment or clothing to use with these animals or plants. If you are using the same equipment for multiple jobs, such as transporting produce or disposing of infected materials, always thoroughly clean it between jobs. Sharing equipment between properties also increases the risk of spreading pests or diseases. If you borrow or lend equipment or purchase second-hand machinery, thoroughly clean and disinfect it before using it on your own property. The condition of equipment storage areas matters. Disease-causing bacteria, viruses and spores can be present in dust and soil, on work surfaces, old feed or on equipment. So keep storage areas clean and use traps and bait stations to control vermin. The best way to reduce your risk is to make sure your workplace has clear procedures to follow and that all staff are trained and know how to follow them. Encourage your staff to watch for and report anything that may put the safety and security of your property at risk. There are many aspects of your production practices that can help support your biosecurity. Your greatest defence is the early detection and control of pests and diseases. Ensure your staff know how to recognise the first signs or symptoms. Involve them in daily monitoring of your livestock or crops and perform regular crop scouting. Know your normal so people can tell what is not normal. Encourage them to immediately report any concerns. Provide information and training through posters, industry publications, or field officer visits. Increase your monitoring during higher risk periods. Source all incoming materials or stock from a trusted or accredited supplier. When receiving new livestock, plants, feed, bedding, propagation stock, compost or growing media, keep them isolated until you are confident they pose no risk.
Any livestock that come onto the property, we monitor them to ensure that they carry no issues, no risks and pose no threat to our biosecurity. We also ensure that all the NATE obligations are fulfilled, both for delivery and arrival of stock, so that we have accurate records and they are recorded to meet the requirements of the national standards.
For vineyard replants, we purchase our grapevines from a nursery that is certified to be growing them under the grafted grapevine standard, so that ensures a high level of quality in the first place. We bring them into our nursery for two reasons. One is to get the vines to establish a better root system and put on a nice straight shoot for us, which makes it easier for us to establish those vines in a vineyard, because really we're just putting in replacements, and that gives them a stronger root system to give them a better start in the vineyard. The second reason is it gives us a chance to keep an eye on the vines before we actually plant them out in the vineyard, so the staff, when they're working on them, they can be observing if there's any disease problems or any pest problems coming in there. Most of the time there aren't any, but it's a good opportunity to be able to do that. These vines are probably looking a little bit rugged at this time of year, because it's the time of year when they're not far off losing their leaves, but they do look normally very healthy, very strong.
All incoming inputs should be inspected for any signs of pests or disease. Check accompanying documentation to make sure everything is in order.
Biosecurity is becoming an increasingly important part of the nursery sector. The best thing that we can do is engage with our suppliers and our customers and our staff about what we can do to keep our nursery safe from biosecurity threat. A really important part of that is making sure that our suppliers are using documented trails to make sure that the product they supply us is good and clean. And if we start on a good footing, the rest of the process is a lot easier.
Dispose of waste in ways that limits any potential spread of infection. Remove fallen leaves, fruit and prunings, as these can attract and harbour pests and diseases. Healthy plant material can be composted. Unhealthy plant material needs to be buried, burnt or disposed of at a specialised facility. Always keep healthy and unhealthy waste material apart to minimise the risk of contamination. Effluent and biological waste can also be a source of disease. Store and apply effluent in ways that meet regional requirements. Dispose of other livestock waste or animal carcasses as soon as possible, or place in a dedicated collection area away from stock, feed or waterways. Cover any carcasses awaiting collection to deter birds, dogs or vermin. It is also important to keep livestock water, feed and bedding clean. Dirty water or feeding troughs will encourage the growth of disease-causing bacteria. Good practice is to have a cleaning roster to keep water fresh and palatable. Where possible, also keep them off the ground so they are less likely to become contaminated by faeces. Damp, wet, old or mouldy feed or bedding can create a bacterial breeding ground or produce toxic spores that results in health issues for your livestock.
It's not just ourselves and animals that can spread disease, actually equipment that's used between farms or feeding equipment that's used between calf sheds or calf mobs or even calf pen to calf pen can spread infection. So ensuring that those things are kept clean, so washing them first with soap and water and then disinfecting them afterwards is very important. Diseases are excellent at surviving in wet, moist, dirty environments, so you can expect them to be being transferred between groups of animals if you're not careful.
Keep food and bedding stores clean and dry and regularly inspect for signs of insects, pests, mould or damage. Dispose of any feed or bedding that is not in good condition. All water sources must be well managed to prevent bacterial growth or contamination. Keep animals, pesticides, fertilisers, compost and rubbish well away from water sources. Where possible, cover wellheads and pumps. If you have a farm dam, prevent algal blooms by aeration or water treatment. Test your water quality, especially if it is being applied to crops used to produce milk or is intended for human consumption. Cleaning and sanitising plant production areas also reduces the opportunities for pests and diseases to spread and to become established.
The best thing we can do for biosecurity is having a very clean nursery, so basic hygiene is a really important part of what we try and do here. And it's simple things like removing plant debris and putting it to an appropriate area, and basic hygiene like cleaning our surfaces and making sure that we've got buckets and brooms so that we can keep all the areas clean and clear of any debris.
How you use pesticides, herbicides and agricultural medications is a key part of maintaining biosecurity. Using the wrong product or amount or application technique increases the risk of pests and diseases becoming resistant to these chemicals. Always make sure you or others are trained to apply the agrochemical or medication, follow the instructions on the label, and use the correct protective clothing and equipment. An animal vaccination program can help reduce the risk or severity of infection. For harvested crops, remove any loose soil or plant material that could attract or harbour pests and diseases. Ensure all equipment is cleaned after harvest so it can be safely stored. Animals that are allowed to mix with others from outside your property can spread pests and diseases. Ensure your fencing is secure to prevent livestock straying, and consider the use of double fencing or planting hedgerows on boundaries to minimise nose-to-nose contact by stock. Ensure that whenever crops or livestock are leaving your workplace, you have checked they are healthy and in good condition. Make sure that vaccinations and parasite controls are up to date. Any animal that is unwell or in poor condition must be inspected by a vet and have a veterinary certificate to permit travel. If you see any signs of disease or pests, stop the livestock or crops from leaving and isolate them from healthy plants or animals. This stops any potential spread to other properties. When taking livestock to local A&P shows, sale yards or other events, make sure you know and follow the biosecurity procedures of the venue. Take responsibility for making sure stalls, water and feeding troughs are clean. If livestock are being exported, become familiar with the overseas market access requirements of the receiving country. These may include having tests for the presence of certain diseases, proof of vaccinations and internal and external parasite control, and vet certification of the animals being fit to travel. If plants or crops are being exported, ensure all phytosanitary requirements of the importing country are met. This includes being free from pests and disease and being correctly packaged and labelled. Any pests or disease that are identified can jeopardise our market access. Whenever sending livestock for processing or to move them between properties or to sale yards, always complete the animal status declaration form. When harvesting fruit and vegetables, make sure staff are trained in your biosecurity measures. This can include hand washing and personal hygiene, ensuring clothing and footwear is clean, when to change gloves, cleaning and disinfecting equipment between blocks, varieties or different production areas. Make sure everyone knows what to pick and what to leave, for example, fruit that has fallen on the ground or vegetables showing signs of pests or disease. Before harvesting, clean and disinfect all equipment and tools, such as picking bags and bins. Clean and disinfect tools and equipment after harvest, ensuring they are free from soil, plant material or insects. Treat harvested crops with care to prevent wounds that would allow bacteria access. Ensure your workplace has good waste disposal procedures for any crop that can't be sold, packing shed waste and plant trimmings. Dispose of this waste in an area well away from production areas and water sources. Store harvested produce that is waiting for transport in clean, dry areas that are secure from insects, rodents, birds and feral animals. If you plan to send animals away for grazing, discuss biosecurity risks with your grazier. Treat stock returning from grazing as new arrivals and place them in quarantine for a minimum of 7 days.
An important point with animals moving between farms might be your young animals, your heifers or calves going off to a grazing unit. They're going to go and mix with other people's animals and come back to farm again. So you need to know what diseases your grazier has knowledge about and what they have protection for. And if they have none, then you need to have a discussion with your vet on those animal disease topics to make sure you protect your animals.
When transporting livestock or crops, ensure you use transport providers that have strong biosecurity and hygiene practices. Ensure any soil or plant material has been removed from produce before transport. In post-harvest operations, use only potable water for washing fruit and vegetable crops. Ensure all crops are accompanied by a spray diary to track the pest and disease protection for that crop. Ensure all packaging and labelling materials are clean and meet the biosecurity requirements of export and local markets.
Traceability is very important to us as a business. We can trace any activity from the field through the pack house to the point of sale. It's all driven by a line number. So here we've got a field bin full of harvested onions with the line number, what farm it's from and what field. Also is captured as the date of harvest, and this barcode is scanned into our internal system so that we can track back the harvest date and any other associated activities that's previously happened to that crop.
When growing fruit or vegetables or raising livestock, you must use agri-chemicals such as plant sprays and animal medications correctly. Correctly using agri-chemicals helps manage pests and diseases of concern to importing countries. This means their market access requirements are more likely to be met and our export income is protected. It also reduces the risk of pests and diseases becoming resistant to these chemicals and potentially creating new biosecurity risks and challenges. This is important for producers supplying both the domestic and international markets. All records and documentation on your outputs must be completed. Traceability is important because it can identify where a biosecurity issue may have occurred and what action must be taken to address that issue. Traceability also gives consumers confidence the food they are eating is safe. Staff and visitors can be a major biosecurity risk, as their movements can unintentionally transfer weed seeds, insects, bacteria, viruses or spores onto or around your property. Where feasible, limit the number of people who visit your property and ask yourself if they really need to come. Make sure your staff are well trained in hygiene procedures, particularly when arriving at the property and moving around the workplace. Talk to them about the role and importance of hygiene, when they need to wash their hands, footwear or equipment. Explain how to safely move between the different production areas, what they need to do in each season or at different times of the year.
So when people come into the business, whether they're a new employee or a contractor, part of their induction process is giving them an understanding of the risks around biosecurity, food safety and traceability. So we talk about having cleaning of equipment between farms, equipment that needs to be cleaned or sterilised if they're using hand tools. Cleaning hands is important to the business because we're dealing with a food product. Safety aspects around contamination from sickness or blood.
Your property will also be visited by a range of people, including contractors, vets, crop scouts, industry members, suppliers, the public, friends and family. Communication is key. Display signs that make it easy for people to understand what they need to do. Clearly signpost your entrances, drives and designated parking areas. Follow the principle of clean on, clean off. Tell visitors your conditions of entry, for example, reporting to the office on arrival and signing the visitor's register. Have signs around your property that show where people can and cannot go. Simple and clearly displayed signs show visitors that you take biosecurity seriously and help them to know their responsibilities. Include biosecurity as part of the induction onto your property, just as you would with health and safety. Assess the risk visitors may have by checking whether they have been in contact with other livestock or crops, known areas of infection, or if they have been overseas recently. Give them the right information to protect your business. Don't assume they will know what to do. Always tell contractors or visitors if your property is under a control notice for a pest or disease. Before entering your property, ask visitors to check their footwear, clothing and tools are free of soil or plant material, or to use protective clothing. Show them your facilities for washing their hands or cleaning their footwear and tools. If a visitor is assessed as high risk, take action to lower that risk. For example, providing them with your own boots or overalls to wear. Anyone who has recently been overseas should have clean footwear and clothes before entering your property. While on your property, manage the areas visitors go. Ensure they only have essential and necessary contact with livestock, plant production areas or crops.
So something that we're doing here at Two Paddocks is when we induct our casual staff from overseas especially, we run through an induction checklist. It's got all the usual things, health and safety, house rules, smoking policies, accident procedures, fire procedures. But something that we're working on lately and introducing into the induction checklist is biosecurity. And it's key for the international staff that have come from, say, America or something like that, and they've been working in vineyards over there. They come through to New Zealand, come straight onto our vineyard. We just want to make sure that all their gear, tramping boots, whatever they're going to wear at work, that during those days are free of any sort of pest and disease.
When visitors are ready to leave, ask them to check their footwear, clothing and tools are clean. This is especially important if they are going to visit another property. Good practice is to ensure your staff have regular updates and reminders about their own actions and hygiene, and how they can work with visitors to ensure your crops and livestock have the maximum protection. Keeping biosecurity fresh in everyone's mind is essential for making sure your procedures are working effectively. Keep records of visitors to your property, including details of any potential risk they may represent. This is easy to do through a visitor's sign-in book or through written notes in your daily diary. Record keeping is important in the event of a disease or pest outbreak. Your records can help trace back or trace forward the cause or source of the outbreak. If there's an issue, your records can help deal with the current situation by knowing where the pest or disease has come from, where it has gone, and where it might also be. These records can also stop other events happening in the future.
Traceability starts in the orchard, going right through the packhouse, cool store and market. The reason we do this is so we know the consumer is getting a product safe to eat from sprays, pests and diseases, as well as many other things. We can trace product forwards and backwards if there is a breach. This means that we can identify where the breach has occurred and put procedures in place to mitigate the risk of it happening again. This gives our consumers confidence in our product.
When you are on another property, be sure to follow their biosecurity requirements and always try to minimise contact with other producers' livestock and crops. New Zealand has 4.7 million people, each of whom has a part to play in maintaining biosecurity. We all need to work together to keep our natural resources and primary industry safe. Be on the lookout for signs of a biosecurity risk, and if you spot anything unusual, call the Ministry for Primary Industries Pest and Disease hotline on 0800 80 99 66.